The fare reader accepted the tap at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, and the system logged a boarding at stop 414, which is the shelter at Garner and 12th. The problem is that stop 414 was decommissioned 19 months ago. The shelter was removed. The concrete pad was jackhammered out and replaced with a landscaping strip by the city. There is a Panda Express where the bench used to be. The fare was valid. The card was registered. The name attached to the account was Diana Olmsted. Diana Olmsted has been missing since October. I need to explain how I even saw this. My name is Vincent Royce. I'm the night operations supervisor for Garfield Metropolitan Transit, GMT, which serves the city of Garfield, Ohio, and 6 surrounding townships. We run 41 fixed routes, 9 of which operate past 11 p.m., and 2 of which run until 1:30 in the morning. I've been in this position for 4 years. Before that I was a route planner for 7, and before that I drove a bus for 3. 14 years total in public transit, which is long enough to have opinions about everything and authority over almost nothing. Night operations supervision is not what people imagine. I don't ride the buses. I sit in the dispatch center on the 2nd floor of the downtown transit hub, a renovated bank building from the 1920s that GMT purchased in 2011. The dispatch center has 8 workstations, but on the night shift it's usually just me, a dispatcher named Carla Voss, and whoever's running the maintenance coordination desk, that rotates weekly. We monitor the automatic vehicle location system, respond to operator calls, manage service adjustments, and handle the incident reports that pile up between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Fare disputes. Medical calls. The occasional police coordination for an unruly passenger. It is boring work in the best way. When transit runs correctly, nothing happens. The buses appear as green icons crawling along their designated lines on the AVL map, arriving and departing within their scheduled windows, and Carla and I drink coffee and talk about her daughter's travel soccer schedule. The fare tap from stop 414 showed up on my secondary monitor as a system exception. We get those constantly. A reader will glitch. A card will be expired, but the system processes the tap before catching the expiration and flags it after the fact. Drivers sometimes manually enter fares wrong. The exceptions queue is a river of minor clerical debris, and on most nights I clear 20 to 30 of them with a few keystrokes: verified, logged, dismissed. This one wouldn't dismiss. I clicked on the exception entry. The standard detail panel opened. Fare type, regular adult. Card number, a 10-digit string I didn't recognize as any of our standard series. Account name, Diana R. Olmsted. Boarding location, stop 414, Garner 12th route, 29N. Vehicle, 2247. Time, 23 hours 47 minutes and 14 seconds. The dismiss button was grayed out. I tried the manual override. Nothing. Carla, you seeing this exception on 29 North? Carla leaned back in her chair and looked at her own screen. She ran through the exceptions queue, which she manages in parallel with me. She shook her head. I don't have anything flagged on 29. What's the vehicle? 2247. She pulled up the vehicle detail. 2247 is running 29 North, Shore. Currently between 15th and MLK. On time. Nothing flagged on my end. Pull the fare log for the last hour on that vehicle. She did. I watched her scan it. 7 taps since 11. Last one was at Birchwood Mall at 11:31. Nothing at 11:47. I looked at my screen. The exception was still there. Diana R. Olmsted. Stop 414. 23 hours 47 minutes and 14 seconds. I could see the data. Carla could not. That was my first night. I should be clear about something. I didn't know who Diana Olmsted was. Not then. The name meant nothing to me. The anomaly registered as a technical problem, an exception I couldn't clear, referencing a stop that no longer existed, appearing on my terminal but not Carla's. I assumed it was a database artifact. When routes are modified or stops decommissioned, the old data doesn't always purge cleanly. GMT's fare system is a patchwork of 3 different software generations held together by a middleware layer that our IT department describes with a word I won't put in an official account. Phantom data happens. I filed a ticket with IT. Reference number 09-4178. I copied the exception details, noted the display discrepancy between my terminal and Carla's, and sent it through the internal system before the end of my shift. The next morning, afternoon, since I sleep until noon, I checked the ticket status on my phone. IT had responded at 8:14 a.m. The note read, "Exception not found in system logs. No fare activity on vehicle 2247 at 2347 on reference date. Stop 414 has been removed from all active and archived route tables. No account matching the provided card number exists in the fare database. Recommend monitor recalibration." Closing ticket. That would have been the end of it. It wasn't, because I Googled the name. Diana R. Olmsted. Garfield, Ohio. The third result was a Garfield Courier Register article from November, 5 months earlier. Local woman reported missing after failing to return from evening shift. Diana Olmsted, 41, a pharmacy technician at the CVS on Garner Avenue, had clocked out at 10:15 p.m. on October 9 and never arrived home. Her car was found in the CVS parking lot. Her phone went to voicemail at 10:22 p.m. and was never recovered. Her husband reported her missing at 7 a.m. the following morning. The article included a photograph. I stared at the photograph for a long time. I did not know this woman. I had no connection to her. But I had her name on my screen at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, tapping a fare card that doesn't exist at a bus stop that doesn't exist, and the system had shown it to me and no one else. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The exceptions queue behaved normally. Carla and I processed fares and managed a fender bender involving Route 12 and a delivery truck. I recalibrated my monitor, which is what IT suggested, though I knew the monitor wasn't the problem. I checked the ticket status daily. It stayed closed. On the 4th night, Friday, at 12:09 a.m., another exception appeared on my screen. Fare type, regular adult. Account name, Gerald T. Wong. Boarding location, stop 389, Reservoir RD/Industrial. Route, 6E. Vehicle, 2081. Time, 9 minutes and 33 seconds. Stop 389 was decommissioned in 2022. I didn't try to dismiss it. I didn't call Carla over. I opened a browser on my phone under the desk and searched for the name. Gerald Huang. Garfield, Ohio. The Courier Register article was from August, over a year ago. Missing since July. Last seen leaving his shift at a warehouse distribution center on Industrial Parkway. Car in the lot. Phone dead by midnight. I sat very still for a while. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I pulled up the AVL map and tracked vehicle 2081 in real time. It was running Route 6E eastbound, approaching the intersection of Reservoir and Industrial. I watched the green icon glide along the line. At the intersection, it paused, the scheduled time point, and then continued east. I called the operator. This is within my authority. Night supervisors can contact any operator at any time for service verification. 2081, dispatch. How's your load? The voice that came back was Marcus Ware. I knew Marcus. Good driver. 12 years on the job. Light night, Vince. Got maybe 4 heads on right now. What's up? Did you take a boarding at Reservoir and Industrial? A pause. I didn't stop there. Nobody at the stop. There's no stop there anymore, Marcus. A longer pause. Right. Yeah, they pulled that one. I just roll through. Why? Nothing. Just verifying a system flag. Thanks. You got it. I hung up and looked at my screen. The exception still read Gerald T. Wong. Stop 389. 9 minutes and 33 seconds. I wrote down the details in a pocket notebook I keep for personal reference. Not an official log. Just a lined notebook I've carried since my driving days. I wrote the date, the name, the stop, the time, and the article date. Then I did the same for Diana Olmsted from the previous Tuesday. I didn't file a ticket. Over the next 2 weeks, 4 more exceptions appeared. Always on my screen. Never on Carla's. Never on the maintenance coordinators. Always between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. Always at decommissioned stops. Always names that, when I searched them, came back as missing persons from the Garfield area. Robert Falk. Missing since March of the previous year. Exception at stop 207, which was removed during the East Side route restructuring in 2021. Yolanda Metz. Missing since January. Stop 512. Removed 2023. Alan Koo. Missing since the previous June. Stop 331. Removed 2020. Patricia Devereaux. Missing since September. Stop 445. Removed during a road construction detour that was never reversed. 6 names. 6 people the city had reported missing over the span of about 18 months. 6 fare taps at stops that don't exist, on routes that pass through the ghosts of where those stops used to be, logged on a system that shows them only to me. I want to be precise about something, because precision is what I have left. These exceptions did not appear randomly. They followed the current route schedules. The fare taps occurred at the exact moment the assigned vehicle passed through the geographic coordinates where the old stop used to be. The timing matched the AVL data to the second. Whatever was generating these entries knew exactly where every bus was, at every moment, and was placing a fare transaction at the exact instant a vehicle crossed a point in space that the system no longer officially recognized. I began keeping a map. Not on the transit system, on paper, at my kitchen table, using a printed city map I bought at a gas station. I marked every decommissioned stop I could identify from archived route tables, which I had access to through the planning archives from my old position. There were 63 decommissioned stops in the GMT service area, accumulated over the past 5 years of route restructuring. Then I marked the 6 stops where the exceptions had appeared. They formed a line, northwest to southeast, cutting diagonally across the city from the old industrial corridor near the river to the residential neighborhoods near the county line. I stared at the map for a long time that afternoon. I traced the line with my finger. It didn't follow any existing route. It didn't follow any former route. It was its own path, assembled from the discarded fragments of the system, a route built from the stops nobody uses anymore, connecting nothing to nothing, or connecting something I couldn't see. There is a concept in transit planning called a desire line. It refers to the path people actually walk, as opposed to the path the sidewalk provides. You see them as worn dirt tracks cutting diagonally across lawns, or gaps beaten through hedgerows. They represent the routes people want, expressed through repetition, against the routes they've been given. The line on my map looked like a desire line. But for whom? I couldn't bring this to anyone. I understood that clearly. I had an IT ticket that was closed because the data I reported didn't exist in the system logs. I had exceptions visible only on my terminal that I could not screenshot. I tried, and the captures showed an empty exceptions queue. I had names of missing people that I could only connect to the exceptions through my own Google searches and a pocket notebook. From the outside, I had nothing. From the outside, I was a night shift supervisor with a possibly malfunctioning workstation who had developed an unhealthy interest in local missing persons cases. I was not losing my grip. I want that on the record. I was sleeping normally. I was eating. My work performance was steady. Carla would confirm this. I was thinking clearly enough to recognize that I had no evidence anyone else could verify, and that this recognition itself was the most troubling part, because whatever was generating the exceptions had constructed them to be structurally invisible to everyone except me. Why me? I spent a long time on that question. I'm not special. I don't have psychic abilities. I'm not particularly sensitive or spiritual. I'm a 46-year-old transit bureaucrat with a bad knee and a cat named Soupy. The only distinguishing feature of my position is access. I see the whole system at night. Every route, every vehicle, every fare transaction, every exception. I am the single person whose job requires simultaneous awareness of the total network during the hours when ridership drops to its lowest and the gaps, the spaces between riders, between stops, between routes, are at their widest. Maybe that's what it needed. Not sensitivity. Just the right shape of attention. In the 4th week, the pattern changed. The exception appeared at 11:51 p.m. on a Wednesday. Same format. Fare type, regular adult. But the boarding location was stop 414 again, Diana Olmsted stop. And the account name was Diana R. Olmsted again. But the route was different. The first time, it had been 29N. This time it was 15W, which also passes through the intersection of Garner and 12th. And the vehicle was different, 2,190 instead of 2,247. She had boarded again. At the same ghost stop. On a different bus. 2 minutes later, another exception. Gerald T. Wong. Stop 389. Route 6E, same as before. But a different vehicle. He was also reboarding. Over the next 40 minutes, all 6 names came through. Same stops. Different vehicles, different routes, whichever bus happened to be crossing that point in the network at that moment. they were writing again. And then, at 12:34 a.m., a seventh name. Margaret S. Yun. Stop 271. Route 3S. Vehicle 2115. I searched the name with hands that were not quite steady. Margaret Yun. Garfield, Ohio. The article was from 3 days ago. She had been reported missing the previous evening. 67 years old. Retired schoolteacher. Failed to arrive at her daughter's house for dinner. Car in the driveway. Phone on the kitchen counter. 3 days. The others had been missing for months or over a year when I first saw their names. Margaret Yun was still fresh, still the subject of active police searches, still being shared on community Facebook groups, still a person the city was looking for. And she had just boarded a bus that doesn't exist, at a stop that doesn't exist, on a route that no map shows. I went to the location. I need you to understand that I'm not someone who does things like this. I follow procedures. I believe in the system, literally, the transit system, the structures of reporting, the chain of accountability that keeps everything running. I have never freelanced an investigation. I have never gone into the field on a hunch. But Stop 271 was 4 blocks from the transit hub. I could see the intersection from the dispatch center window if I pressed my face to the glass and looked south. At 12:50 a.m., on my break, I walked there. The corner of Maple and 7th. There's a dry cleaner, a tax preparation office that's only open from February to April, and a fire hydrant. No bus stop. No shelter. No sign. No concrete pad. Nothing indicating that a transit vehicle has ever stopped at this location. I stood on the corner in the cold and felt foolish. What was I expecting? A ghost? A shimmer? Diana Olmsted standing under a streetlight with her arm raised for a bus. There was nothing. The street was empty. A car passed 2 blocks away. The HVAC unit on the dry cleaner's roof cycled on with a low hum. I stood there for 7 minutes, I timed it, and then I walked back. When I returned to the dispatch center, there was a new exception on my screen. Margaret S. Yun. Stop 271. Route 3S. Vehicle 2302. Time, 53 minutes and 8 seconds. I had been standing on that corner at 0:53. I had been standing on that corner, and a bus had passed through the intersection. I remembered it, the distant headlights on 7th, a Route 3 southbound making its late-night sweep, and at the exact moment it passed the spot where I was standing, Margaret Yun had boarded. And I had seen nothing. I started riding the buses. This was not part of my job. A night operations supervisor does not ride vehicles. But GMT employees ride free with their ID badges, and there's no policy against a supervisor choosing to observe operations in person. I told Carla I wanted to do spot checks on late-night service quality, a reasonable enough cover, though she looked at me with the particular expression she reserves for decisions she considers unnecessary. I rode Route 29 North first. Diana Olmsted's route. I boarded at the transit hub at 11:15 p.m. and rode the full loop. When the bus passed through the intersection of Garner and 12th, where stop 414 used to be, I watched. The bus didn't slow down. There was no stop to slow down for. The driver maintained speed through the intersection, and the Panda Express slid past the window, its interior lights still on for the closing crew. I felt nothing. I saw nothing. The fare reader at the front of the bus did not chime. But when I checked the exceptions queue on my phone, I'd figured out how to access my terminal remotely through the supervisor portal. There it was. Diana R. Olmsted. Stop 414. 23 hours 48 minutes and 2 seconds. She had boarded while I was sitting 6 rows back. I looked around the bus. There were 3 other passengers. A young man with headphones in the back. A woman with grocery bags 2 rows ahead of me. An older man near the front reading a folded newspaper. None of them had boarded at Garner and 12th. None of them reacted to anything. I rode 4 more routes over the next week. Each time, I positioned myself near the location of a decommissioned stop where I'd logged an exception. Each time, the bus passed through without stopping. Each time, an exception appeared on my screen at the exact moment of passage. Each time, I saw nothing, heard nothing, felt nothing. They were boarding. I was there. And I couldn't perceive them. There is a particular kind of frustration that comes from being the only person in an organization who can see a problem that the organization's own tools confirm doesn't exist. It's not the frustration of being ignored. I hadn't told anyone, so there was no one to ignore me. It's the frustration of being architecturally alone. The system was showing me something through a channel that only I could access, using a display that only I could see, and the people it was showing me were people that the city had already lost. I was the sole audience for a performance I couldn't record, couldn't share, couldn't prove, and couldn't stop watching. I want to talk about Margaret Yun for a moment. Her daughter's name was Christine. I didn't learn this from the exceptions. I learned it from the news coverage, which expanded over the following 2 weeks as the search continued. Christine Yun Pascoe gave 3 press conferences. She was composed in the first, cracking in the second, and hollowed in the third. She taught 4th grade at Garfield Elementary. She had 2 kids. She wanted her mother back. I watched these press conferences on my phone during my shifts. I watched them because Margaret Yun boarded a bus on my system every night. Consistently. Stop 271, whatever route happened to be crossing it, between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. Her name appeared on my screen with the regularity of a commuter. She was, in some sense I could not access, riding the bus. And I could not tell Christine Yun Pascoe that. What would I say? Your mother taps a fare card every night at a bus stop that was removed in 2022. I can see it on my computer. No one else can. The computer denies it when anyone checks. Your mother is riding a route that doesn't exist across a system that doesn't acknowledge her. She boards, and she goes somewhere, and I don't know where, because the exceptions don't log a destination. Only a boarding. Never an alighting. They never alight. That's the detail that started keeping me awake during the hours I should have been sleeping. Every exception was a boarding. In 4 weeks of observation, across 7 names and dozens of repeated fare taps, not a single one logged a deboarding. They get on. They never get off. I went back to the map. The line I'd drawn, the diagonal from northwest to southeast, connecting the 6 original decommissioned stops, now had a 7th point with Margaret Yun's stop 271. It didn't fall on the line. It fell slightly east, creating a gentle curve. I stared at it. I added the other repeated boardings I'd logged, noting which vehicles and routes were involved each time. And then I saw it. The names weren't random. They were sequential. Diana Olmsted. Gerald Huang. Robert Falk. Yolanda Metz. Alan Koo. Patricia Devereaux. Margaret Yun. The order I first encountered them was the order they had gone missing, earliest to most recent. And the stops they used, when connected in that order, didn't just form a line or a curve. They formed a route. A coherent, navigable path through the city that used only decommissioned stops, following streets that existing routes touched but never followed in this specific sequence. A route built entirely from the pieces the system had thrown away. I sat at my kitchen table and traced it. Northwest from stop 207, through 331, 389, 414, 445, 512, and curving east to 271. The path was 14 miles long. It crossed the city in a way no planner would design, looping through a cemetery, cutting across the highway overpass, threading through the old meatpacking district that's been abandoned since the plant closures. It passed through places buses don't go because there's no one there to ride them. Or no one living. I wrote this in my notebook, Route Unknown. 7 stops. 7 riders. No destination logged. No alighting recorded. They board in the order they disappeared. The route connects only the dead infrastructure. I crossed out dead and wrote removed. Then I crossed out removed and put dead back. In the 6th week, I did something that I cannot defend procedurally and would not recommend to anyone in my position. GMT's fare card system stores the last 4 boarding locations for each account. This is a customer service feature. If someone calls to dispute a fare, the agent can see where they've been tapping. The data is accessible through the administrative backend, which night supervisors can reach with our credentials. I logged into the backend and searched for Diana Olmstead's card number. The system returned no results. As expected, IT had already confirmed that the card number didn't exist in the fare database. But I had her card number. I'd copied it from the exception on my screen. And the exceptions were fare transactions. They used the same data format, the same field structure, the same protocol as every other fare tap in the system. They looked like fare data because they were fare data. So I tried something else. I accessed the raw transaction log, not the processed database, but the unfiltered feed from the fare readers on the vehicles. This is a maintenance tool, used for diagnosing hardware issues. It captures every electronic signal the readers send, including malformed taps, partial reads, and interference noise. It's a river of junk data that nobody looks at because the processing layer filters it into the clean database. I searched the raw log for Diana Olmstead's card number. 114 transactions. She had boarded 114 times since October. Every night. Sometimes twice. Always at stop 414. The raw data was there, time-stamped, vehicle tagged, route identified, complete. It had been captured by the fare readers, transmitted to the central system, and filed in the raw log. The processing layer had then filtered it out, because it referenced a card number that didn't exist in the account database and a stop that didn't exist in the route tables. To the clean system, it was noise. Junk data. Interference. She was in the noise. They were all in the noise. I searched for each card number. Gerald Huang, 89 transactions. Robert Falk, 131. Yolanda Metz, 98. Alan Koo, 107. Patricia Devereaux, 72. Margaret Yun, 19, and climbing every day. 7 people who had vanished from the city were boarding buses every night, their presence captured by the machines and then automatically erased by the software, persisting only in the lowest, least examined layer of the system, the layer where data goes when the system has decided it isn't real. I need to tell you about the 8th name. It was a Thursday. I was halfway through my shift, running the exceptions queue on autopilot while drafting a memo about weekend service reductions for a public hearing. The exception appeared at 11:58 p.m. Fare type, regular adult. Account name, Thomas K. Welliver. Boarding location, stop 461. Route, 8W. Vehicle, 2276. Stop 461. I checked my map. It was on the northwest end of the route, the start of the line. Decommissioned in 2023 during the last service cut. I searched the name. Thomas Welliver. Garfield, Ohio. No missing persons report. No Courier Register article. No Facebook posts. No police bulletins. I searched harder. LinkedIn profile, project manager at a logistics firm in the Garfield Business Park. Facebook, private account, but the profile picture showed a smiling man in his 50s holding a base he'd caught. White pages, an address on Briarwood Lane. Thomas Welliver was not missing. As far as any public record showed, Thomas Welliver was home, alive, and had never been the subject of any concern whatsoever. And he had just boarded a bus at a dead stop on a route that doesn't exist. I sat with this for a very long time. The others, Diana, Gerald, Robert, Yolanda, Alan, Patricia, Margaret, they were already gone when they appeared in my system. They were missing. The city had lost them, and they had surfaced in the only place still listening, the noise layer, the junk data, the frequencies below the threshold of institutional attention. I could construct a story around that, even if the story was impossible. But Thomas Welliver was not missing. Thomas Welliver was, by every indication, alive. Unless he was going to be. The route I'd mapped ran from northwest to southeast. The names appeared in the order of disappearance, earliest to most recent. Margaret Yun, the most recent, had appeared at stop 271, the southeasternmost point. Thomas Welliver had appeared at stop 461, which was northwest. Before the beginning of the sequence. Earlier in the route. If the route was chronological, and Welliver's stop came before Olmsted's. No. That didn't work. Olmsted disappeared in October. Welliver was alive now. Unless the route didn't map to when they disappeared. Unless it mapped to when they would board. The physical order of stops along the route. Welliver at stop 461 was the next stop on the line after Yun's 271, extending the route further. The route was growing. And Thomas Welliver was the next stop. I'm going to tell you what I did, and I'm going to tell you why I did it, and I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'm going to tell you the part one can't explain, which is the part that is me writing this instead of sleeping. I went to Briarwood Lane. At 3:15 in the afternoon, on my day off, I drove to the address listed for Thomas K. Welliver. It was a split level in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees and a two-car garage. There was a sedan in the driveway. The lawn was mowed. A basketball hoop stood at the edge of the driveway with a net that was starting to fray. I sat in my car for 15 minutes trying to figure out what I was doing. I was a transit supervisor who had driven to a stranger's house because his name appeared in the junk data of a fare processing system. I was about to knock on this man's door and tell him, what? That he was going to disappear? That a ghost bus was coming for him? That I could see his name in a machine that no one else could see, and that every other name I'd seen in that machine belonged to someone who was gone. I knocked on the door. A woman answered. Mid-40s, pleasant face, drying her hands on a dish towel. She looked at me the way people look at unexpected visitors, open, cautious, waiting. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. Is Thomas Welliver home? Tom's at work. Can I help you with something? I'm Vincent Royce, with Garfield Metropolitan Transit. We're doing some community outreach about service changes in the area, and his name came up on our resident contact list. This was a lie, delivered smoothly, because I had rehearsed it in the car. Oh. Well, I can pass along any information. I'm Beth, his wife. Has your husband had any changes in his commuting patterns recently? We're trying to assess the impact of the route restructuring on regular riders. Beth laughed, not unkindly. Tom hasn't taken a bus in 20 years. He drives everywhere. You might have the wrong address. It's possible. Databases get mixed up. I'm sorry to bother you. She waved it off and I went back to my car and sat there and did not feel better about anything. Tom Welliver hadn't taken a bus in 20 years. Tom Welliver didn't use public transit. And Tom Welliver was boarding a bus every night at a stop that doesn't exist. I didn't warn him. I want to state that. I considered it, in the car, driving away from Briarwood Lane. I considered going back and telling Beth Welliver that her husband was in danger, that something in the transit system had identified him, that 6, now 7, people had disappeared from Garfield and I could see them riding in the dead architecture of my network. I didn't, because I understood what that conversation would produce. It would produce a police report. It would produce a wellness check on me. It would produce a meeting with my supervisor and the HR director and possibly a fitness for duty evaluation. It would produce the end of my access to the system, which was the only channel through which any of this was visible. If I was removed, nobody would see the exceptions. Nobody would be in the noise. The 8 names would continue to board and board and board, and the processing layer would continue to filter them into non-existence, and the junk data would pile up in a log that nobody reads, and whoever Thomas Welliver was becoming would become it without a single witness. I chose to keep watching. This is the moral center of what I'm telling you, and I'm not going to dress it up. I chose the information over the person. I chose to keep my position, keep my access, keep my observations, over the possibility, the uncertain, unverifiable, possibly delusional possibility, of saving a man I didn't know from a fate I couldn't describe. I told myself I needed more data. I told myself intervention without proof would only destroy my credibility. I told myself all the reasonable things. And 17 days later, Thomas Welliver went missing. Beth Welliver reported him gone on a Thursday morning. He had left for work the previous day and never arrived. His car was found in the parking lot of a gas station on Route 14, 3 blocks from stop 461. His phone was dead by noon. The Courier-Register ran the story on Friday. Christine Yun Pascoe shared it on the community Facebook group with a caption that said, "Another one." I read the article at my kitchen table with my notebook open and my map spread out and the line of stops staring up at me, and I understood something that I had been refusing to understand for 6 weeks. The route wasn't recording the missing. The route was selecting them. And I was the only one who could see the selection happening, and I had done nothing, and the route was still growing, and there would be a 9th name, and I would see it before anyone else, and I would face the same choice I had already failed. 3 nights after Welliver's disappearance, I was at my terminal at 12:17 a.m. when the new exception appeared. Fare type, regular adult. Account name, Christine M. Unpasco. Boarding location, stop 308. Route, 11N. Vehicle, 2194. Stop 308. Decommissioned 2021. I didn't need to search the name. Christine Unpasco. Margaret Yun's daughter. The 4th grade teacher. The woman who gave press conferences. The woman who wanted her mother back. I stared at the screen. The route was adding the daughter of someone it already had. I looked at my map. Stop 308 was south of stop 271, Margaret Yun's stop. The route was extending further southeast, growing in the same direction, and it had reached past its existing riders to take someone connected to them by love and grief and the act of searching. Christine Unpasco was going to go missing. And when she did, the city would lose not just another person but the loudest voice asking where the others had gone. I closed my notebook. I opened it again. I closed it. I stood up and walked to the window and looked south toward the intersection of Maple and 7th, which I could almost see if I pressed my face to the glass, and I thought about the choice I had already failed to make and the choice I was being given again. I sat back down. I opened the supervisor portal. I pulled up Christine Unpasco's public contact information from the community Facebook group she moderated, which listed her email address for tips about her mother's disappearance. I wrote, Ms. Unpasco, my name is Vincent Royce. I work for Garfield Metropolitan Transit. I have information about your mother that I cannot explain through official channels. I believe you may also be in danger. I know how this sounds. I am not experiencing a mental health crisis. I am asking you to meet me in a public place so I can show you what I've found. Please. I sent it at 12:44 a.m. She responded at 6:12 a.m. Where and when? We met at the Panera on East Main at 2 p.m. She was already seated when I arrived, a small woman with short black hair and circles under her eyes that looked like they'd been there for weeks. She had a coffee she hadn't touched. She watched me sit down and said nothing, waiting. I showed her the notebook. I showed her the map. I explained the exceptions, the fare system architecture, the raw transaction log, the names, the pattern, the sequence, the route. I spoke for 40 minutes. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "You saw my mother's name in a computer." Yes. And you're telling me my name is there now? Yes. And the last person whose name you saw, Welliver, he disappeared 17 days after you first saw it? Yes. She picked up her coffee, looked into it, and set it back down. How do I know you didn't put the names in the computer yourself? You don't. But I couldn't have. The card numbers don't exist in the fare database. I can't create transactions for accounts that don't exist. IT has confirmed the data isn't in the system, it only appears in the raw log, which I have read access to, not write access. You could have faked the notebook. I could have. Why are you telling me? I had prepared for every other question. Not this one. I sat with it for a moment, and then I told her the truth. Because your name is the 9th one I've seen, and the 8th person I saw disappeared, and I didn't warn him. I went to his house. I spoke to his wife. And I convinced myself that I didn't have enough information, and I left, and now he's gone. I don't have enough information now either. I still can't prove anything. But I'm not going to watch another name appear and do nothing. Especially not yours. Christine stared at me. She was assessing. I could see it, the calculation running behind her eyes. Is this man credible? Is he sane? Is he dangerous? Is he the only person in 4 months who has offered me anything that isn't a sympathy card or a procedural update from the police? Show me, she said. I shouldn't have brought her into the dispatch center. Visitors require advance authorization, a signed liability waiver, and escort by a department manager. I had none of these. But at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, the downtown transit hub is a hollow building with locked doors and nobody on the second floor except me, Carla, and whoever's on the maintenance desk. Carla was on a bathroom break when Christine arrived at the side entrance. I let her in with my badge and took her upstairs. I sat her in the chair next to my workstation and pointed at the secondary monitor where the exceptions queue displayed. It won't happen on schedule, I said. It happens when the bus crosses the old stop location. We just have to wait. We waited. At 11:47 p.m., the exact time, to the minute, of the very first exception I'd ever seen, the entry appeared. Diana R. Olmsted. Stop 414. Route 29N. Vehicle 2247. There, I said. You see it. Christine leaned forward. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. She looked at the screen again. Vince, she said. The queue is empty. The air went out of me. She couldn't see it. I pointed at the entry. My finger was touching the screen, directly over the text. It's right here. Diana R. Olmsted. Stop 414. 11:47. Christine looked at where my finger was pointing. Her face went through something complicated: sympathy, fear, doubt, a thin edge of anger. There's nothing there. Over the next hour, 6 more exceptions appeared. Gerald Huang. Robert Falk. Yolanda Metz. Alan Koo. Patricia Devereaux. Margaret Yun, her mother. I read each one aloud as it appeared, and Christine sat beside me and saw nothing but an empty queue on a screen that was showing me everything and her nothing. When I read her mother's name, she gripped the edge of the desk. My mother's name just appeared. Stop 271. Route 3 South. Vehicle 2302. 12:08 a.m. And I can't see it. No. She was quiet for a long time. Carla came back from her break and I introduced Christine as a community liaison doing a ride-along observation, and Carla accepted this with the indifference of someone who has worked night shifts long enough to stop questioning anything that isn't actively on fire. At 12:19 a.m., Christine's name appeared. Christine M. Yunpasco. Stop 308. Route 11N. Vehicle 2194. I read it aloud. She heard me. She looked at the screen. She saw nothing. And then she said, "What stop did you say?" 308. Decommissioned 2021. Corner of Lancaster and 5th. That's my bus stop. I looked at her. When I was in high school. Before they cut the route. That's where I caught the bus to school every morning. Stop 308. I stood there every day for 4 years. I went back through the data that night after Christine left. I checked every decommissioned stop against what I could find about the lives of the people whose names appeared there. Diana Olmsted, stop 414, was 2 blocks from the CVS where she worked. The old stop had served her commute before the route change. Gerald Huang, stop 389 was at the entrance to the industrial park where his warehouse was located. He would have used it if he'd been a bus rider. Robert Falk, stop 331 was outside the apartment building where, according to a 10-year-old Craigslist listing I found cached in a search result, he had once lived. Every person was appearing at a stop that had been part of their life, a place they had stood, or would have stood, or had once belonged to. The route wasn't just using dead stops. It was using their stops. The stops that had been theirs, in some configuration of their lives, before the system removed them. The system had deleted the stops. And something had kept them. Something was running a route through the negative space of the transit network, picking up people at the places the system had decided didn't matter anymore, carrying them on buses that didn't know they were carrying anything, and never letting them off. Christine called me the next afternoon. She had not slept. "I've been thinking about what you said. About the alighting. That there isn't one. That they board but never get off. Where does the route go? I don't know. The data only shows boardings. But there has to be a last stop. The route goes from northwest to southeast. What's at the end?" I looked at my map. The line of stops extended from the far northwest of the service area to stop 308 in the southeast. Beyond 308, the route would project toward the edge of the city, past the residential neighborhoods, past the county line, and into the decommissioned park and ride, I said. What? When GMT cut the Southeast Express routes in 2019, they shut down the park and ride at County Line and Old Mill. It's been sitting empty since then. The city's been trying to sell the parcel. There were 5 stops along the express route, all decommissioned. And that's the direction the route is heading. Yes. Then that's where they're going. We drove there together. Saturday afternoon. The park and ride was a cracked asphalt lot behind a corrugated metal shelter that had been padlocked since the closure. Weeds grew through the expansion joints. The GMT sign had been removed, leaving 4 bolt holes in the shelter's facade. A chain-link fence surrounded the lot, but the gate was open, the padlock was hanging from the chain, unlocked. I walked the perimeter. Christine stood in the center of the lot and turned slowly, looking at nothing, feeling for something I don't think she could name. I found the shelter. The padlock on the door was rusted but also open. Inside was a bench, a faded route map under clouded plexiglass, and a fare reader. The fare reader was on. I don't mean it was plugged in. There was no power to this facility. The overhead lights were dead. The route map display was dark. But the fare reader, a standard GMT contactless unit mounted on a steel post, had a green LED glowing steadily on its face. The screen showed, "Ready." I touched it. It was warm. Christine. She came to the shelter and saw it. She looked at me and we both understood that we were standing at the last stop of a route that shouldn't exist, looking at a machine that was waiting. "Can you check the raw log?" she asked. I took out my phone. I logged into the supervisor portal and accessed the raw transaction feed. I filtered for the fare reader ID on the unit in front of us. Transactions found, 2041. 2041 fare taps on a reader in a padlocked shelter at a decommissioned park and ride with no electrical service. I scrolled. The card numbers were not the 7, now 8, I recognized. They were different numbers. Hundreds of different numbers. The timestamps stretched back years. 3 years. 4 years. 5. Longer than the park and ride had been closed. These aren't the people I've been tracking, I said. Then who are they? I searched the first card number against the raw log. It had no account name associated with it. Unlike the exceptions on my screen, these were anonymous taps. Just card numbers and timestamps. I searched another. Same. Another. Same. But the timestamps had a pattern. Each card number appeared exactly once in the log. A single tap. And after the tap, the card number never appeared anywhere else in the system, not on any vehicle, not at any stop, not in any other reader. They tapped in at this reader, and then they were gone from the data entirely. This was the alighting. This was where they got off. And they didn't board again. I am writing this in my car, in the parking lot of the transit hub, 40 minutes before my shift starts. My notebook is full. My map has too many marks on it. Christine texts me every morning to confirm she's alive, and every morning I confirm back, and every night her name appears on my screen at a dead stop that used to be hers. The 9th name appeared 4 days ago. Lucas da Silva. A college sophomore. Stop 117, which served the university campus before the route consolidation. He's not missing yet. I found his Instagram. He posts about intramural soccer and his girlfriend's cooking. He has a whole life ahead of him, and his name is in my machine, and the route is growing, and the Park and Ride Fair reader had 2,047 taps when I last checked, 6 more than when Christine and I were there. I have not gone to the police. I have not gone to my supervisor. Christine and I discussed this, and we reached the same conclusion independently: there is nothing to show them. The data exists only in the raw log, which looks like junk. The exceptions exist only on my screen. The fair reader at the Park and Ride is, we checked, invisible to the network. It transmits to the raw log but doesn't appear in any hardware inventory. Its serial number doesn't match any GMT-issued unit. What I have done is this: I have started a spreadsheet. Every name, every stop, every timestamp, every vehicle. I've cross-referenced the names with public records, mapped the route, documented the intervals between first appearance and disappearance. The interval is shortening. Olmsted, weeks before my observation began. Huang, weeks. Metz, weeks. Devereaux, 23 days. Yun, 17 days. Welliver, 17 days. The average time between first appearance on my screen and disappearance from the physical world is getting shorter. Or the route is getting more efficient. Christine's name first appeared 26 days ago. She knows this. She checks in every morning. She's changed nothing about her routine because, as she put it, if something can put me on a bus I can't see at a stop that doesn't exist, I don't think locking my doors is going to make a difference. She asked me once if I thought her mother was in pain. I told her I didn't know. She asked me if I thought the boarding was the end or the beginning. I didn't know that either. She asked me if I had looked at the fair reader at the Park and Ride, really looked at it, and I said yes. Did it feel like an ending? I thought about the green LED. The warm casing. The screen that said ready. The 2,000 taps from people who touched it once and vanished from the data. It felt like a door, I said. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, my mother always took the bus. Her whole life. She never learned to drive. She said the bus was how the city told you where you belonged. I think about that. I think about the decommissioned stops, the places the city decided nobody belonged anymore. And I think about the people appearing at those stops, night after night, tapping fare cards that don't exist, boarding buses that don't know they're being boarded, riding a route that the system built from its own discarded pieces. I think about the raw log, and the 2047 taps, and the fact that every name I've seen has belonged to someone the city was already failing to notice: night shift workers, retirees, people who lived in the neighborhoods the routes were pulled from when ridership numbers didn't justify the service. I think about the route, and how it's shaped like a desire line. The path people actually walk against the path they've been given. My shift starts in 11 minutes. Carlo will be there. The maintenance coordinator will be there. The exceptions queue will be there, and the names will come, and I will write them down. Lucas da Silva is still posting on Instagram. He posted a photo of his girlfriend's pasta 3 hours ago. He's alive. He doesn't know his name is in my system. He doesn't know he's the next stop on a route that no map shows. I have to decide again. I have decided again. I'm going to warn him. And I'm going to sound insane. And he's going to look at me the way Beth Welliver looked at me, polite, cautious, waiting for the strangeman to leave, and nothing I say will be verifiable, and no evidence I show will be visible to him, and the route will keep growing. But Christine is alive on day 26. Thomas Welliver disappeared on day 17. The numbers may mean nothing. But she is alive, and she was warned, and the route hasn't taken her yet, and I don't know if those facts are connected, but I am going to behave as though they are, because behaving otherwise is something I've already tried, and a man is gone because of it. There is a last passenger on every bus. Someone who boards knowing they're the final fare of the night, that the bus will go dark after them, that the route ends wherever they're going. I used to drive those routes. I remember the feeling of watching that last person board and thinking, this one's mine. My last responsibility. Get them home safe, and the night is done. I don't drive anymore. But the route keeps adding passengers. And the fare reader at the end of the line keeps counting. And I keep watching the names appear on a screen that only I can see, one at a time, in the order they'll be taken. Christine texted me 9 minutes ago. Still here. My shift starts in 4 minutes. I'm going in.